Welcome to this special edition of SportsBeat KC, the sports podcast of the Kansas City Star and KCUR. I'm Blair Kirchhoff. It's Wednesday, April 22nd, and the Kansas City Royals have announced their new home. It's Crown Center, the business, commercial, and residential district that was created by Hallmark in the early 1970s. It was quite a presentation earlier today with Royals majority owner John Sherman, Missouri Governor Mike Kehoe, Kansas City Mayor Quentin Lucas, and Don Hall Jr., the former CEO of Hallmark Cards, along with Negro Leagues Baseball Museum President Bob Kendrick. They took part in an hour-long ceremony at the American Restaurant at Crown Center. Star columnist Vahe Gregorian joins us to discuss this historic day, not just for the Royals, but for Kansas City. Hello, Vahe.
Hi, Blair. Thanks for putting up the bat signal. Seems like the right day for it.
Yes, an emergency podcast it is. It's been more than 3 years, almost 3.5 years since the first public hearing with John Sherman at the Plex Pod when he was rolled out the idea of a downtown ballpark, and maybe a half a dozen or more sites that were considered, explored, suggested. And I guess what it comes down to for me is we've been looking out the wrong window here in our Crown Center office. To the north, looking at Washington Square Park, and we should have been looking to the south at Crown Center.
That is a little bit of a pivot, although I'm grateful, at least for the time being, that it didn't turn out we should be looking at the ground below us for the building just to be gone. So apparently we're still in the renderings in the background. But yeah, so it looks like really the fundamental news of the day is, right, that it's much more, it is in the Crown Center footprint. But I think I should say right out loud first, there seems to be a strong effort to preserve what Crown Center has meant to Kansas City. Like where this will take place is understood to be at the Hallmark headquarters. That's what will be torn down as Hallmark gets a new home, smaller, more contoured to its size today, and yet still in Crown Center. So I bring that up right away just to say, when you first hear, oh, it's going to Crown Center, are you thinking wrecking balls go through the skating rink and the fountain? No, at least not in what we're shown right now. It seems like that's important.
It seems like from the rendition, what I've seen is a lot of the growth is going to go south of where we are.
South, a little slightly southeast-ish. Yeah.
But the church, Our Lady of Sorrows, will remain intact. As the steeple will remain and actually be higher than the stadium because of the topography there.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know if there's any symbolism in that or not, but at least for now, that would appear to be sort of the southeast border. And so Gillum Road will be the easternmost part. But again, as I understand it, and you might have a better vision literally from seeing the renderings or from being in this seat, but right after that is where this will all begin. So I don't know where the entrances will be. I can't quite place any of that just now.
And Washington Square Park is going to be part of this.
Yeah.
In some way, right? It's going to be part of the district, the 85 acres.
Yeah.
Which John Sherman talked about.
So this is going from 5 acres to
Right.
85 acres. Right. So apparently the footprint will
massive
enable some growth. It is, unless I missed a huge portion of the presentation today, which I didn't, I was, in the scrums and everything. We have no real notion of what the ancillary developments will be, right? I mean, that's a whole nother element of this. In fact, what I found interesting and didn't get to ask about afterwards was that as they spoke about the $3 billion in the initial project, John Sherman a couple times made a point of saying in phase 1. Now, I don't know are they just going to take over the whole city? I mean, so we'll see what that comes to mean, but it's very intriguing and sort of puzzling all at once to figure out what's the Washington Square part of this ultimately going to be? Will there be an opportunity for a lot of, outdoor activity? Events and such. Is that how it will be? It just didn't really get much sorted out today.
Right. There are many questions yet to ask about this.
Yeah.
And time to ask them.
Time to ask them. And look, I think on one hand, we all want details and we want them now. On the other hand, there is some part of this that is simply how a process will work, right? This still has to go back to City Hall for approval on some things. There have to be things worked out like tax increment financing at certain aspects of it. So as much as we want all this stuff front loaded, and there is some stuff I think they could be more transparent about, we think some of this truly is just how it unfolds in due time.
You mentioned the $3 billion. Let's touch on that just for a moment. It appears that 1.9 to $2 billion of it will come from the team, right?
Yeah,
and
team and its partners, I think was the term they kept using.
Right.
Yeah,
2/3, and then a third would be public money without a vote for the public money. Some of it's going to come from the Show Me Investment Fund, the state fund that was created last June, I believe, for a financing mechanism for maintaining professional sports teams in Missouri, and some will come locally as well, Jackson County, Kansas City. We don't know. That's another area that we're still trying to learn more about, where the money's actually going to come from.
Yeah.
How much of it's going to, what percentages we're talking about here. But I think public money was always going to be a part of this. Certainly the vote 2 years ago was about the 3/8 sales tax, extension of the 3/8 sales tax. But if unless I'm mistaken here, the Royals are going to end up ponying up more than the Chiefs are for their stadium on the Kansas side.
Sure looks like it, right? I mean, at this point, the way the term has been used by the Royals, and it's reflected in some of the numbers we know, the Royals would pay for 2/3 of all of it, including the stadium part. Stadium has been said to be $1.9 billion. City has committed to $600 million. I think we are not getting this number yet from the state, but I think what that means is if you add up what the Show Me, was it a bill? Is that the term?
Investment Act.
Investment Act
Yep.
was called, versus and juxtapose that or merge that in with what the Royals are saying today. I suppose we ought to be thinking that they're shooting for that to be 300 to 500 million in that neighborhood, but that's not at all certain, and I think there's some mileposts still to go. And one thing though, I think we wrote a story about this, Blair, a couple of weeks ago. Pardon me for not remembering fully, but I think we did write something comparing the city's $600 million to the nature of the Star bonds. In other words, the point is, city does not have $600 million it's writing a check for, and it will be repaid through the district.
Right. That is, when we've talked about the funding of stadiums, both for the Chiefs and the Royals, Star bonds, TIF money, the ways to these are kind of new ways to finance stadiums that avoid the taxpayer, avoid the ballot box, not the taxpayer. Taxpayer is going to pay for one way or the other. Taxpayer is going to pay for it, but it avoids the ballot box. And I suspect after 2 years ago, that was foremost in the minds of the Royals. And the Chiefs.
Just by any logic, it seemed like, okay, that wasn't the way it was going to work. Now, look, I think it's also true that this is, in a lot of ways, an entirely different project, starting with that, but also, one thing that appears to have held true that I think is significant in this is that as Mayor Lucas was sort of unveiling this, and as we had conversations with him and other people, it was expressed a few times over and over, nobody's going to get displaced. Now, theoretically, not even theoretically, Hallmark will be displaced, but Hallmark is a partner in this and has agreed to such displacement, and which I assume will mean a reinvigorated, smaller office area. So that's held true, at least to this stage, and that's one. The reason I'll bring that up is one of the obvious issues with the previous site that was soundly rejected by voters was great resistance in the Crossroads because of the disruption to a thriving area. Now, there's a whole bunch at play in that, as you know, but so these are different types of manifestations of deals.
The concerns about some of the other sites, I think, are not concerns with the Crown Center site. The size of Washington Square Park, the acreage, the parking of some of the other downtown sites. There are 9,000 spaces just in the Crown Center. We park in them every day.
Yeah, and what it's interesting about that, right? There are many people who've been consumed with nothing but the parking since this got discussed. And, we've been hearing for a couple of years now, don't sleep on Hallmark's parking spaces, and there's thousands, but the way I understood it was maybe 5,000. And today the number they gave was 9,000. Now, I lived in St. Louis a long time. It is no fun driving out of a parking garage after an event. And, that's going to be its own thing and whatever. But it's also no fun driving out of Arrowhead after a football game. So, there's going to be some, there's always a little blood on the cutting edge, as they say. But look, it's also understood. Young people live downtown in Kansas City. There is walkability of residents. Certainly, there's much more walkability to this stadium than there is to the current stadium.
Which is to say none.
None. And there is a streetcar that I think we ought to be, I think really playing through our minds in a lot of ways, the possibilities with what the streetcar can mean in this.
I have that listed on my things to talk about, because by choosing Crown Center, and would have been true also of Washington Square Park, the streetcar line basically becomes the western border
Yes.
of the property. That wouldn't have been true at some of the other sites, certainly if it had gone to Clay County and Kansas. But here, wow, I mean, you'll be able to park anywhere along the streetcar line, including down at River Market,
Right.
and just take the streetcars.
Just think about both ends of this, right? I mean, all right, somebody's coming from Johnson County. Last I remember, the plaza has free parking. Park in the plaza. You're on the free streetcar to the stadium. River Market, a little thicker fits to find parking. Maybe it's not all free, but they're definitely access points. And I don't know. To me, it seems actually far better. John Sherman was talking about this today. I mean, he to his credit, he didn't try to make it sound like, this is what we're shooting for all along. He made the point that there were the ups and downs, but if you really look at it, I mean, having a couple of those things be built in, 10,000, 9,000 Hallmark parking spaces, and I don't know, 2-minute, 4-minute walk from where the streetcar comes off. And I think today, I thought I heard them say, but I haven't gone back through my notes yet, that they're even talking about certain game day extra transit, some things like that. So, so we'll see on all this. Of course, this is what I'm thinking about right now is, boy, when they put shovels in the ground in 2027, going to be a long few years in between.
Yes, it will be.
In this artery of the city.
It also occurred to me that if the Royals wanted to, they wouldn't have to change the name of anything. They would just call the whole thing Crown Center.
Well, that's right. And maybe that's, we were talking about this earlier, like, okay, they're partners with Hallmark now. Nobody said anything about the nature of the partnership. Like, what does that mean? But maybe there's some signage or, the signage, you don't have to worry about it, right? It's the Hallmark artist designed the Royals logo, and, the circle of life continues.
Great stuff, Vahe. Thanks so much.
Yep. Thanks, Blair.
That'll do it for this special edition of SportsBeat KC. Thanks to our staff of Gabriella Lacey, Irvin Zhang, and Suzanne Hogan, and to our editors, Jeff Rosen and Scott Chasen. If you like what you heard or have a suggestion, please leave us a review or rating, or both. Thanks so much for listening. We'll be back soon with another SportsBeat KC, where we talk sports in Kansas City.